Behind the Shades.
J-Zilla, hello. How are you doing today, sir?
Very well, sir, and yourself.
I am well. I'm back from vacation, so I'm a little tired, but I'm rested. I'm good. I can't complain, right?
Yeah, you seem like you have that return from vacation glow about you, man.
I
It's
know I was
good.
working on my tan a little bit, so so I
Yes,
know
sir.
today we're going to talk about a topic that is very close to my heart because I don't have children, but I always want to speak to parents and those who have children, especially men, because I don't think we get enough of insight from men when it comes to children and having that type of conversation. So before we get right into it, J-Zilla, introduce yourselves, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are and where my guests, my audience can find you.
Absolutely. So my government name, as the kids say, is Jeremy Gale Sr. I'm married, have been married for going on 8 years. I have four beautiful children. My girls are 18 and 14. My boys are 4 and 6. That's right. You heard correctly. My wife and I produce we do two podcasts together, and then we produce about four more. And on the side, sort of a side thing with our company, our LLC, what we do is help people set up their podcasts, and we troubleshoot with them, and just sort of try to make a nice content creator community in order to the whole concept of iron sharpens iron. So we do that together. We have other aspects of our company, but they're just kind of in pre-production at this point, so I won't go into that. You can find us at our website at Studio GWB. That's G as in girl, W as in Walter, B as in boy. StudioGWB.com. There you can find, any information, all of our socials, our merchandise, everything. It's all kind of in one sloppy place, and we apologize for any issues ahead of time because this is very new for us. But you can find me across all social media at WTFJ. Oh yeah, let me get this right. At WTFRAPJ. There it is. Yeah, you can tell I'm without my producer, man. I'm not as clean and smooth without her. You're getting the raw J-Zilla, and so that's a little bit about me.
Perfect, perfect. So let's dive right into. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey being a father and a husband, and how did that all start? And one question I always like to ask on top of that is, did you see yourself as a husband and father way back when we were like, I think I can actually do this?
Ooh, I like it. I'm gonna answer your questions in reverse order. Um, I came from a single parent home. I have two younger sisters. We're all roughly 2 years apart. So two younger sisters, single mom, and I just could remember always saying, I want a giant family, right? I've always wanted to be married. I've always wanted to have a bunch of kids running around. Until I started having them, then it was like, four is enough. You don't know till you get in that situation. But yeah, so I've always wanted to be a family person. And how I got started, mine was that of sort of Jonah and the big fish story in the Bible, right? I was on my way. I was working out of Georgia. I was on my way to Australia to sign up for a dual educational work program, which I would basically travel around Australia and the surrounding places of Japan and Europe and work for 6 months while going to school, and then I'd go to the next city. I was single, and I was very vibrant, and all my bones and joints were pretty healthy. And so I thought, this is a cool, slick way to see the world and finish out my education, as well as make a little money. So, but I had this moment where one of my dearest friends, a person I met when I was 12, 13 years old, we dated a little bit in high school. We stayed in contact throughout that entire time, on and off, as friends do. But I had a moment where I realized, oh my goodness, I'm in love with this woman. And so made my plans to do a complete 180 from Australia to New Mexico, where she was with her two beautiful girls. And, now they're my two beautiful girls as well. And that's where we started our journey. And it's been quite the education, very, very fulfilling, but very trying. And, because kids can be relentless as much as they are joyous. And yeah, I've enjoyed every minute of it, man. Good, bad, and ugly.
For me, I had a similar story, but it wasn't as what's the word I'm looking for? Movie-esque. It wasn't, one of those romantic
Oh.
romantic comedies, right?
Yes,
And
sir.
I grew up without my being raised by my mother and my father. I was raised by my grandmother. So single parent, just a different generation like you. And in my teens, I was like, Terrain, let's get a family, right? That's in my mind. I'm like, Terrain, get a family because you didn't have one growing up and you didn't know what it was like. And
Mm-hmm.
I had plans to do so. And the girl that I was dating at that time, um, she was like the same thing, right? It was, yeah, we're going to get married. We met each other's parents. And then everything went downhill.
Oh no.
No happy ending to this story. And it was interesting because how many people actually meet the parents of the girl or the guy that they're dating and it doesn't work out like that, right? Like we didn't even get to the point where we're walking down the aisle. We have the second guess. But it was an interesting experience for me because it made me realize that I was looking for all the right things in all the wrong places with that
Yeah.
person. Right. And I wanted it so bad that I was willing to sacrifice that. And then I flash forward to where I am now, where I'm more comfortable and more established, and I can do the things that I want to do. Because if I want to be a father, and maybe you went through this, J-Zilla, I want to be the best father that I can be.
Yes.
Right. I want to be super dad. I want to be dad of the year. I want to be on Time Magazine with my picture on it.
Hey,
Terrain,
there you go.
dad of
Father
the
of the
year,
Year is what we
right?
call it on our show.
Yeah, father of the year. Did you still, as you were getting your children and you're going down that path, did you have that same goal that you want to be the best dad that you can be because of the situation you came up in and you want to try to correct or break the generational trauma?
I'm of the mind, breaking of the generational promise is definitely part of the formula there. But I was of the mind that, oh man, that's a really good question. You're making me like, I keep coming up to, forks in the road of my thought process here. Hmm. I'm of the mind that the summation of a person stems from the whole of their experiences and the experiences of people they trust, right? So for me, I heard a bunch of horror stories. I heard a bunch of great stories. One thing that always stuck with me is, I've seen, and I'll say this about my Caucasian brothers, right? Is that I've seen situations where husband and wife, have kids. It doesn't work out. They split amicably. And, new person, step parent moves in and they all get along. They all go on vacations together and they all share, like, hey, we're not going to be able to pick up, child one through whatever. Could you handle that for me? Sure. Me and my new wife will be right over, So I always had the Walt Disney brand of hope that, oh, if that situation can work out, I can figure out any other situation. But then I got around a crowd that just had, in our community, a bunch of baby mama issues, and I saw the ugly side of things. And at that point, I said, you know what? No, I'm not. I've relegated myself to I'm not getting married. That dream is dead. All right, so let's try to build myself up as a person, because I am not going to get in that situation. Because what I recognize in my father, which we have a great relationship now, but what I recognize is that he was this lovable, huggable, jolly, black giant, right? who enjoyed art and poetry and music, but he was, I'm the runt in the family. He's 6'7" or so, an absolute giant of a man, but he enjoys all these other eclectic, things. And so I was trying to figure out, how did he go from that? How did my mother go from strong, educated, like intellectual softball player, right? and then how they get together, and then it turned out so badly. So I started operating based out of fear. There's no way I'm going to get married because I don't know what changed my father to who he eventually became. And so I just said, I'm going to build my empire alone. And I told my now wife at the time that, yeah, I don't think I'll ever get married. And she was like, well, what about me? And I was just like, no, I just don't view you like in that way. Ooh, that could be rough. And she just, it's funny, we joke about it now because her reply to me was, yeah, we'll see. And so after I got married, like one thing that stuck with me in that speech of hers was, don't be afraid. Like, she says, I've always loved you. And I get it if we're never going to get married, but don't give up on your dream of marriage. I've known you for a long time. You've always wanted to be married and have a bunch of babies. Don't give up on that dream, and don't get so bogged down with, I've got to be this perfect version of myself before I get with someone and start having kids. I think a proper relationship is you get together, love each other for who you are, and then you improve and build upon that, and build your empires together, which is what we're trying to do now.
Some of my friends, or some of my male friends, are going through that. They're struggling with the fact that they may not be good enough for what they want in life, and they have yet to realize it. And when it gets mentioned, like how your wife said, don't give up on your dream, you can do this. But on the flip side, when it gets mentioned to them, they want to fight. They're so resistant to the idea. And I think, as you mentioned, that is within our community, because growing up, I spent so much time around Pakistanis and Indians, where family traditionally is so strong out in the East, right? Like, let's say Chinese, Japanese, things like that. They don't have time for this nonsense, basically, right? It's like, okay, when we get together, what we do represents the family, to the point where it's like, hey, we need to make sure that the family is good. Now, when I look at things within ourselves, we have a little bit of a struggle, because you mentioned a good point where you said that you've seen the ugly side, which is a lot of people in our community having a lot of kids with multiple fathers and they're unmarried. When I took myself out of that scenario, because I grew up in a poor area, when I moved to the suburbs and I started seeing everything family related, where you had parents bringing their kids to football, to hockey, to softball, to baseball, where you had the family dinners where you'd go over and no one eats until everyone comes to the table, says grace, and do stuff like that. You're like, I can't get a little bit of a biscuit before someone comes over. But it's like a different vibe. When you got married to your wife, who you love so much and for so long, and you started raising your children, did you reflect on the fact that you're like, hey, I have exactly what I want at this point in my life, when many, many years ago, everything I saw was a complete opposite?
Yes. So for us, like I said, man, having a family is very educational. And I think I would suggest anyone who begins a family, you have to, one of our shows is Urban Academia. We had a guy who's a felon, and myself, who, I went to Vanderbilt University, which is a private college in the Southeastern Conference. So we the ones that get beat up by the Tennessees and Alabamas and Georgias, right? But we're in the conference to kind of help you know, the averages in the classroom stay above board. Okay. So, but what I took from all of that is, what I would suggest to people getting involved in a relationship and raising a family is kind of what we have as show rules on Urban Academia. And that is, everybody's a little bit right. Everybody's a little bit wrong. Each of us has something of value to share. That's just something, a foundation that just is for us. And that's worked out well, because if you hold true to that, you're not trying to interrupt someone when they're talking because you respect them and you don't want to be interrupted. It seems fairly easy in theory, but as we all know in science, my fellow scientists out there, the theoretical yield is never 100% what the actual yield is. But if you have the mindset that if I see my the person in the relationship and I see they get frustrated, I want to now take on some of their frustrations with them and see what are the possible solutions. Even if it's just let me be frustrated and angry and go away with the kids somewhere, that's a solution. But you have to be willing to want to improve whatever, negative situation arises and then improve upon all the positive situations. And I think as long as you have that format, I think that's also my theory as to why the Eastern world does so much better than we do here in the West. One of the blessings and the curses of American culture is this idea that you come here and you make up your own rules. Whereas in India, everyone has an agreed upon ideal of, the gods and the rules and how we work and how family works, right? And it's not that the women are so much, whipped into shape over there. It's an agreed upon cohesive collaborative unit where I know that I may not meet my husband until my wedding night, but I know that like here's what a wife does, and the husband is taught here's what to expect from your wife, and here's what the wife expects from you, and it's such a shared, I don't know, hive mind sort of thing that you can have an arranged marriage and then they stay together for 60 years, and they learn to know each other and love comes after the marriage. So I don't know. That's one of those things that I just think both parties have to be willing to say, we want this to work. We're willing to do the work, and we're willing to be flexible as to how to go along, creating a cohesive family unit.
So one question I always like to ask married couples is, how has your view of marriage changed before you got married and now that you are married?
All right. So in our religion as a Christian, we believe that we're one unit. So we always joke and say like, hey, left side, hey, right side. We have that sort of playful banter. Now, so I'm going to try to answer this, with that duality in mind. I believe she would say that I came in supercharged and dogmatic because my first two children are stepchildren, even though I consider them my babies. So I was instant father. Like I got a wedding ring and two kids all at the same, swing of the sword there. So I remember being on the phone and like hearing something in the background and like, what's going on? Oh, she took this from that person. Oh, when I get there, I know how to handle that. And she was just like, okay. And yeah, so it turns out that I would say the dogma that I had as a single man, a very ordered life, any chaos I was seeking to snuff out instead of kind of riding along with some of the chaos, because you can never truly get rid of 100% of chaos, right? There's always going to be room for order and vice versa. And so I would say for me, though, um, starting to understand more about what it means to be the husband and man in a relationship and being head of household. Like, so for me, it was very traditional, like what dad says goes with the ideal of how can dad's word make sure his word rains down in fairness, right? Firm but fair and not oppressive. And I had to let that go rather quickly because my wife, is a strong Black woman from the South. Okay. So she helped to re educate me in that. And now we've come to an agreement that, yes, what you say go, you're a head of household. But what that means is responsibility. That means discipline. That means leading by example, knowing when you need to be the one talking, when you need to shut up, dad, and just listen and adjust. Like, so we have a whole system set up to where if you don't like the rule in the house, bring us a presentation. Tell me what the way, because what we do is we bring things to the table with our kids and say, hey, this is something that we want to get done. Like say, we're going to keep the common areas clean. How can we accomplish that? Here's how we want to do it because we know it's effective from our experience. And if they don't like it, they can submit an alternative. Not just say, I don't want to, but hey, what about this way? And then we negotiate. We teach our children how to negotiate, with respect and with not just, I don't want to, but with show me those receipts. Why do you think this will work? Hey, let's do a trial period for a month. hey, let's talk about it. How did it go? You know, so that's kind of what's changed since I've gotten married. It's being more of a running like a company that's working collaboratively versus, you know, man at the top wagging his finger and, you know, delegating everything.
It's like gone are the days of the drill sergeant, right? Where you step through the door, do
Oh,
this, do that, and and don't question anything. But
hmm
I like that idea a lot because it encourages input from children, right? And sometimes children may feel powerless within their own home because it's like, well, these are my parents' rules and I have to follow it. And I may not understand, but they're my parents. But you give them
hmm
responsibility and you give them empowerment, saying that, hey, this is what we're looking at. Let's clean the common area this way. And someone may say, hey, dad, hey, mom, have you thought about doing this way? No, okay, that sounds like a reasonable idea. Let's do like a
Right.
7-day trial or 14-day trial. Is that accurate description?
Yes, sir. You nailed it. You nailed it. And all of that is flexible. You know, what we don't allow our kids to do is, you know, I read the book by Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, 12 Rules for Chaos, you know, and Order. Um, and one of the rules was you don't let your children do anything that you don't like. And as you read that chapter, it's like, oh, because society as a whole probably is not going to like that. And you want society to like your child, to give them the best opportunity for the best opportunities. You know, that's the goal here. Not equal, but you know, um, equal in outcome, but the equal opportunity, right? And what we believe from our experiences and experiences of people we trust is that manners go a long way, right? Soft tones go a long way. Listening skills and things of that nature go a long way. So that's the things we try to, you know, celebrate in our home. And anytime they have a little attitude or eye roll, it's like, hey, I want you to sit down here. That hurt my feelings and it made me feel frustrated, which has the potential to make me feel angry and take that anger out on you because I have a considerable amount of power as dad. You don't want to do that. Be smart. And so that's what we try to give our kids. And I love that you use the word empowerment, especially having two teenage daughters. You know, I want y'all to be okay with saying no and meaning it and sticking with it. Don't ever get yourself in a position where you say, well, I guess I'll let this thing, whatever that thing is, I'll let this happen because I don't want to hurt someone's feelings. Don't be okay with risking offense. Yeah. Sorry, I went somewhere there. I don't know what happened.
No, I love that answer because I actually, that book you mentioned, I am a third way through it. I started reading it
Ah,
and I love to read. And that is such a beautiful book because so far, because when other books come up within a book, I'll Google search and I say, okay, this is my next on the
yes.
list, right? And I have a reading list. And I've been following Jordan Peterson for a number of years, and he's from Canada, where I'm from too, Toronto, exact same city.
All right.
And one thing that I liked about what he says and what many others say is they put the responsibility back onto the person. They're
Individuals,
saying,
yes.
exactly right. They're saying that if you are going to expect this from someone else, you better be able to expect it from yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because other people will expect it from you. So, for example, if I expect you, J-Zilla, to behave a certain way, I should be able to expect that from me because you may turn around and say, you know what, Terrain, you don't, you're asking this of me, but if I would ask it of you, you wouldn't do it. And I think when it comes to relationship and friendship, that's key because if you're going to ask your wife, your husband, your boyfriend, girlfriend of something, you better be ready that if they were to turn around and say, hey, how about you do it with me? You can't say no.
Yeah. That's it, man. That is it. One of the things we do as well, and I have to quickly just kind of like, so you talk about being a Swiss Army father, the utility and flexibility that it takes to be, I think, an effective parent is being able to say, okay, man, when do I put self on the back burner and bring the child up? And then when do I switch that? I think there's a lot of guilt with parents of like, oh man, I'm being self-indulgent right here. You know, should not be a person like Hollywood says that I only think about my kids. It's like, no, they'll tell you on the on an airplane, quick, fast, in a hurry, to make sure to put your oxygen mask on first before you assist someone else. Because if you pass out, you're not going to be able to help anybody. You know, So self-care is hugely important in trying to constantly find that balance that's ever fluid. Is a real thing. But what I did was I came up with a bunch of rules for myself, as I went along. And some of them have stuck. Like we have one that says, if it's important to them, it's not important to me. Now that's extremely trying because my kids they haven't developed taste quite yet. Some of the stuff they watch, sir, is horrible, right? It's annoying, high pitched voices and tones and bright colors and makes no sense. It's just super, super silly. But if it's important to them, it's important to me. So I make time to sit down and consume what they're consuming. And sometimes some things pop up. We had this situation where my son was listening, watching a show with headphones. He's 6. That's odd to me. And so I came in, I was like, hey, buddy, what are you watching? He's like, oh, I'm watching them make some like tiny meals or whatever, where they have the miniature cooking. And I'm looking at the screen and it looks, on the up and up. I was like, okay, hey, plug it out take your headphones out. I wanna watch with you. And even at 6, he was just like I don't know if that's a good idea. Right. And what I discovered is the audio was like a crime series describing some of the most horrific crimes in America. The audio played over this cutesy little, just chop up little fruit here and fruit there and make a fruit pizza. It's like, holy cow. I was like, wow. So we paused and we talked about it. So tell me what you know about crime in America. Tell me about, the murder that they're describing. This is to a 6-year-old now. And he's just like, I don't know. I said, well, maybe we should work on some other stuff so you'll know how to properly process that. Do you care if I show you a couple of my videos? And then we do, and it's like Baby Einstein or the number blocks. And he's just like, yeah, I'm putting all this together. Okay, I know how to count. And I know certain sight words now, so try to absorb all that and redirect. That's huge. I think it's going to pay huge dividends versus me looking and going, all right, he's quieting out my way. Let me go to my room and watch what I want to watch by myself. But yeah, if it's important to them, it's important to me. We made time to share each other's, values and likes and dislikes. You're gonna have to give me like a flashing red light, man, because my show is more of a like back and forth. Wait, I disagree, that gummit.
No, I agree with too much of what you're saying. I think that's the real problem.
I'm used to doing a show with my wife, and she's like, "Yeah, but what do you think about this?" I'm like, So when it gets quiet, I'm able to talk at length without interruption. It makes me nervous.
Oh no, believe me when I tell you this, they're here for you. They like me, but they're here for you. But one thing I want to share when you said that is a good point, because I know sometimes like when you're discussing like a topic, you want that like that back and forth where it's like, okay, let me interject because I don't agree, or I may agree with what you're saying. Right. But the way you paint the picture makes me take in the knowledge, and I'm learning because it's an advantageous place for me because I don't have children and I don't have children and I'm not married. And I'm like, okay, what he's saying is how I navigate my friendships. So basically he's saying that I can navigate my friendships very similar in a similar way to my intimate relationships. I can set the same expectations. I can say, hey, let's sit down and talk about this. Let's have this type of conversation. And another point that you made that I really like is that you extended that not only to your wife, but to your children. You say, hey, let's see if you can understand what's going on in regards to what you're seeing, because the imagery, based on what you described, definitely doesn't match what is being heard, right?
Right.
And then you went from there. Is there a way where you're able to find your balance in regards to you as a man, you as a father, and you as a husband?
Compartmentalization, my friend. Oh my goodness. That's something that I'm still working on now. Like, for instance, I've built up a relationship with my wife now. So I was born in Dallas, Texas. She was born in Atlanta, Georgia. But we spent most of our lives in a small town of Columbia, Tennessee. And that's about 45 minutes south of Nashville. We met at her grandfather's church. We were brought up Baptist. I had my moment of atheism of like, I was asking questions, I guess too many questions. I was a little interviewer even then, apparently. And I was taught, you don't question God. And I thought, I don't want to be a part of anything that you can't poke and prod and learn in an intimate way. So I feel like I was out until I went to a church where a pastor like stopped his sermon because he saw the face of one of his deacons, and they had like a little mini debate on the side. He just stopped everything. Now I notice that face from Deacon blah blah blah. Tell me what's your issue. Well, Pastor, you said this, but when I read that, I think of it this way. How do I? And they went back and forth till they arrived at a place where they could move forward. And then he went back and did his job. And I thought, like, wow, you can do that. You can have some sort of discourse and, respectfully, and then come to some sort of, I don't know if it's even ground, but, middle ground to where now you guys can work on building something up from the same level, you know? So yeah, that's been really, really huge in my life. So my wife and I, it's very important. One of the things she said was literally, what are babies if not just little tiny versions of ourselves, you know? And so if I have a time where I'm unhappy about something, like, of course, the world looks at me crazy if I were to start throwing stuff around and throwing a temper tantrum, even though it happens in adulthood, right? But at that point, like Peterson says, you're just an old infant, and nobody wants that. At least a baby has the cute factor and complete ignorance, right? But I find that that little invisible thread that runs through all of us of we want to be heard, we want to be respected, protected, and served, to a certain degree. Um, and the way to do that is be willing to serve. It's that golden rule. Like, how do you want to be treated? Treat others that way. So I've always enjoyed, my teachers and my coaches, or even when I've coached football, I did 1 year of high school and, a bunch of years at the youth level. I realized that, just talking to these guys, like they're human, yields some really good results. Even my negotiation style tactic with the girls stemmed from me being a coach. And, I had a guy, who was saying, like, I think we should really run this play, coach. I'm like, that makes no sense. Why do you want to run this play? And he was very passionate. I was like, all right, let's try it. And they scored on us quite easily. And I remember being ripped by the head coach of like, why would you call that, blah, blah, blah. I say, well, he wanted to try it. He said, yeah, but blah, blah, blah. I was like, hey, coach, we won the game. I get what you're saying. But I made that mistake, and I'm taking that on full 100% responsibility for that. I said, but now we've got this kid for the rest of his time here. He was a sophomore. So this kid is looking at plays and thinking about how a play turns out and trying to strategize with me. I gave him one piece of trust that turned out badly, but he'll remember that for the rest of his career. And he did, So those little things that we can do with other humans, no matter the age, I think respect is the utmost of importance.
The example you gave in the church is something that I went through when I was going through the church, where I was introduced to it at a young age, like many people, right? You go to your Sunday school with your corduroy pants and your itchy shirts and everything. Or else. And one of the things I didn't like was that where there wasn't any discourse. It was you sit down, you shut up, and you just listen to what the priest or the pastor is saying. As I got older in my teens, that's where I discovered that, hey, you can actually have these questions. And I remember there was, I think we called them, was it church elders back then? I think so, right? Something like that. Yeah, church elders. And I would ask a question, and then he would like, okay, this is how he interprets it. He'll answer it. He's like, but do you have any other questions about this? I'm like, oh, I can ask more. Because usually it's like one and done, right? I can ask more. And I started asking, and then I remember they were saying that, hey, why don't you speak to so-and-so, and you guys can pair up. So it was like one of the church elders gave me a mentor for the religion, for the Bible. And it had such a positive impact on my life to the point where at my peak, I guess, in the church, I was leading Bible talks. I was giving Bible readings. And I love the conversation because growing up, church was one of those things like your parents, you don't question it. But then when you're, like we mentioned earlier, with you and your family, when you're empowered, it helps you to understand a lot better and say, hey, I don't know about this. I don't know about that. And I would have loved to see that conversation in your church where it stopped and two people had the conversation, then they just resumed. Because to me, that's exactly what church is about. And it's so harmonious when I see that. Um, your show, J-Zilla, what are some of the things that you talk about since you have so many of them? And it
Mm.
seems like you touch on a number of topics. So give us, I guess, an overview of some of the conversations that happen there and
Oh,
how are
wow.
you inspiring people with those shows?
Oh, that's good. So the two shows that I'm actually on front facing is one is what we talked about before, Urban Academia. I do that with a guy named Anthony Richard. We played ball together in middle school and then against each other in high school. I went to a private college. He went to prison. And so when he got out and, I saw how he was moving, getting married, having kids, starting businesses, and just being a really, positive, comeback story. Like it's something I always really looked up to. And this was privately. He watched my show, and I'm sure you've experienced this in your career as well. And I was sitting there kind of struggling, like, man, are people getting what I'm trying to do here? And I kid you not, this magical moment of like, I got a private message from him and says, "Hey man, I see what you're trying to do. You keep doing it." I booked him immediately. And we talked, and he was on the show twice. And my wife, whenever she really enjoys the conversation, I'm like, I need to hire this guy. I need him on the team. I need people to hear him talk. And, because she just enjoyed our interview so much. I'm not ashamed to say that sometimes she's just like, hmm, you know. But when she gets excited and you can hear her muttering in the background over some of our audio in the earlier days of like, yeah, but what about this? That is important. When people want to engage for better or worse, you're really onto something, you know. So that's Urban Academia. What the Frap is what I do with my wife. Frap is kind of just the F word and crap blended together. When I was at Vanderbilt under Coach Bobby Johnson, this is 2004. Probably the most famous person on that team was Jay Cutler. And what birthed out of that rule of no cursing was frap. It was a way for us to express ourselves without having to run or after practice. So I was noticing that I was using the term so often that I decided to put it in the actual show title because I was constantly looking at news at that point. And this was, right before Trump made his announcement. And I found myself, what the frap, all the time. And so even if you see in our intro, we try to switch it up every now and then, but it's just a bunch of headline stories that make you go like, what the frap is going on in the world? The takeaway is me and anybody that I have on the show, we're trying to seek improvement in such a public way as to connect with people who are also seeking improvement. And so they don't have to feel like they're doing it alone. Like some of our first videos were horrible, and it was literally like, okay, guys, so looks like y'all can hear me, but you can't see me. And I would like just do a voiceover of all the troubleshooting, and then, hey, that worked. Make sure y'all put that down. You do X, Y, Z, and that's how you maintain your video and all that. And our audience gets involved, pretty good there in trying to, hey, have you tried this? And then, hey, I'm having this issue. I'm like, sure, but what that's done is made us kind of a little small family that we can discuss a myriad of topics, politics, sexuality, parenting, relationships, everything. And that's what we do. If I see you out there and you seem interesting, I'm reaching out. I want to hear more about whatever you were talking about in that little 30-second clip, and that's kind of how I book right now too, is just who interests me, or what are they doing and how. And that's kind of both of the shows in a nutshell.
Perfect. And as we close, is there any advice that you'd want to give to the next generation who are up and coming and they're like, I listened to that guy, J-Zilla, and he's inspired me to be the best dad that I can be. And they're looking for advice on how to make it, even though they may not have seen it themselves growing up.
Oh my goodness. Oh man. If my wife were here, she'd be giving me the be concise and short eye. So I'm thinking of a way to do this. That's a lot. I've learned a lot in my 37 years of age. Look at the people in your field that are doing the things you want to do study them, and see what you can accomplish right now. And be okay with just saying, they asked a billionaire, how did you become so successful overnight? He says, overnight success, you say. He says, okay, well, I was passionate about a thing and I started learning about it and just doing it and being okay with failing. And, 20 years later, boom, overnight success. So be okay with the long term failure up. Be okay with changing your definitions of things. Thomas Edison said, I have not failed. I just simply found 10,000 ways that didn't work. You know, value kindness and respect, discipline. There's the old movie Lean on Me where he says, discipline is not the enemy of enthusiasm. Be okay with doing something you hate like you love, says Mike Tyson's trainer. Just be okay with just try to find your voice. Be okay with things that seem like a failure and never give up on your dreams. If it's a dream that's not going to hurt you or others, go after it with everything you have and have fun doing it.